Greetings and welcome to episode 3 of a journey through the history of Papua New Guinea. My name is Kemelo Gima. In this episode, we're heading back to the year 1606. It is the story about what happened when ships from the European country of Spain suddenly appeared at Mailu Island more than 400 years ago. It is an incredible story about a violent meeting between people from two very different civilizations. This story is not well known outside of Mailu, perhaps because it happened so long ago. You might find this story surprising, and you probably have not heard about it. But it is a story that the people of Mailu will never forget.
As Camelo said, this story is about what happened when the Spaniards came ashore and violently confronted the people of Mailu. This map shows Mailu Island, just off the south coast of mainland Papua New Guinea. But before we begin the story, we need some background about what Europeans were doing at that time. As you saw at the end of episode 2, in the early 1500s, Europeans began exploring the world's oceans. They were looking for new lands and trade routes so they could find spices such as pepper, ginger, cloves, and nutmeg, which were much in demand in Europe. They were also searching for valuable goods like gold. Christian missionaries also went on some of the ships, searching for people in new lands they could win over to their religion. This map shows where they were exploring. They soon found the island of New Guinea, and sailors made brief visits at several places along the north coast and on nearby islands. But they didn't stay long in New Guinea because they didn't see anything there that they really wanted. They were more interested in the trade and riches they could find in other places in Africa, Asia, America, and the Indonesian islands, then called the Indies. This Spanish map was drawn in the year 1600. It shows that Europeans had explored along the north coast of New Guinea and nearby islands, but had not seen the south coast. They did not know how big New Guinea was. They thought that New Guinea was probably joined to a large continent to the south. They even had a name for the land they had not seen. They called it Terra Australis Incognita, or just Terra Australis. It all began in December 1606, when the Spanish captain, named de Quiros, left Peru in South America with 3 ships and sailed across the Pacific Ocean. He was looking for the Great Southland that Europeans believed was somewhere in the southern hemisphere. After sailing for 5 months, the Spaniards came to the islands later called Vanuatu, shown by the red flag on the map. Soon after this discovery, Captain de Quiros departed for Mexico, leaving behind the other 2 ships. The captain leading the 2 ships was called Torres, and with him was another captain named de Prado. Prado was senior to Torres, but Torres was in command of the ships. Captain Prado is important to our story because he wrote down in his journal what happened on the voyage. Prado's journal was discovered in 1919. In the journal, he describes what happened at Mailu, and this is how we know so much about what happened. Prado's journal has been reprinted like in the book you see here. If you want to read it, search for it online. It is available free on the internet for anybody to read. After de Quiros departed, Torres gave up trying to find the Great Southland. He decided to sail to the Philippines, which was another territory governed by Spain. The quickest way to get there was to sail around the north of New Guinea, but this was impossible because the winds were against him. Instead, as this map shows, he changed direction and sailed along the south coast of New Guinea. This route was unknown to Europeans, but Torres hoped he could find a way through that would lead to the Philippines. Remember that Europeans had still not found Australia, even though they believed there must be land somewhere to the south of New Guinea. On his way back to the Philippines, Torres stopped at several islands east of Milne Bay, near New Guinea. When he reached the tip of the mainland, he called at several villages, and on the 24th of August, he came to Mailu Island. When the Spaniards arrived, Mailu village might have looked something like it did in this photograph. It shows Mailu in 1921, soon after Europeans had come to settle. We can imagine that the Mailu people would have been very surprised when the two Spanish ships suddenly appeared and anchored near their island. They were unlike any sea vessel they had seen. Mailu village, with about 300 houses, was a powerful centre of trade along the coast, and was the home to expert canoe builders and sailors. They saw the foreigners as a threat and were determined to defend their island. The next morning, the Spaniards left their ships and came ashore. The people of Mailu decided they would stop them entering their village. Mailu warriors lined up on the path to stop the Spaniards going any further. The Spaniards facing the Mailu warriors would have looked something like the armed Spanish soldiers in this picture. At first, the Spanish soldiers made signs of peace, but the Mailu warriors shouted at them to leave and waved their weapons. The Spanish soldiers lost patience. They pointed their weapons and opened fire. The explosion of their guns would have been deafening, and smoke would have filled the air. Some warriors fell dead, and the others, seeing their friends suddenly collapse to the ground, turned and ran to their canoes. More were shot dead as they fled across the water. But the battle wasn't over. On a hill near the village, the women, children, and elderly men had gathered for their own safety. When they saw their warriors fall, they hurled stones down at the Spaniards, shouting in defiance. The Spanish response was merciless. 20 armed men climbed the hill and fired their weapons at men, women, and children. About 300 survivors descended from the hill, many carrying the dead bodies of their loved ones, including children. The Spaniards entered Mailu village and looted the gardens. They stole yams, sugarcane, and other crops. Then Prado claimed all the land for Spain, including the mainland of New Guinea, and named it Magna Margarita, in honour of the Spanish Queen. Then came the final act of cruelty. Prado ordered his men to select 14 children, boys and girls, between 6 and 10 years old. These children were seized and taken onto the Spanish ships. Prado says in his diary that they took the children to the Philippines. They were handed over to Catholic priests and raised as Christians. Their families never saw them again. The sailors also wanted to take a young girl, about 15 years old, but Prado would not let them. He allowed an old woman to take her back to the village. On the 28th of August, the Spaniards left Mailu and sailed westwards, heading for the Philippines. This map shows the voyage of Torres along the south coast of New Guinea in 1606. By making this journey, Torres proved that New Guinea was not joined to a great southland, and his name has become famous. But behind him, he left devastation. His stay at Mailu was brief, but the people there have never forgotten those terrible days in August 1606.
The painful memory of what happened in August 1606 stayed with the people, and they never forgot. In the year 2006, the people of Mailu decided to do something about it. They decided to hold a special event, which they called a reconciliation ceremony. They wanted to make sure it was a chapter of history that was not forgotten. In the next episode, episode 4, we will talk about how this ceremony was organized, and we will see what happened. It is a wonderful story, and I look forward to seeing you then.